Medical expenses are an investment in yourself. They are an investment in your future well-being.
If you're looking at your financial health heading into the new year, don't forget to factor in the cost of your physical health. Studies have shown that people will choose to delay medical care or skip it altogether because of cost. Here to help make sense of healthcare and personal finance is Laura Adams, author and host of the Money Girl podcast.
You know, when you think about what causes stress, there are a lot of sources. We could be talking about low income. We could be talking about high expenses. We could be talking about problems managing money. There are just a whole lot of reasons why people may feel stressed. It could come down to the way they were raised and really just not truly feeling in control of their money, not feeling that they understand money. When you don't understand something and you feel out of control, it's really, really easy to feel anxiety and stress. The first step is always acknowledging what you're going through, and I always tell people, never worry alone. If you can worry with somebody else, whether that's a spouse or a friend or a financial advisor or a CPA, a friend that is doing well with their money, if you can involve somebody else, in a lot of cases, that's part of the secret of not only acknowledging that, yes, I am worried, I am stressed, but when you share that worry with somebody else and you make it a team sport, if you will, it starts to dissipate. And so I always encourage people, acknowledge it to yourself and then acknowledge it to somebody else and be selective about who that person is or who that professional is. But that's usually the first step to kind of pivoting and getting on a better path.
Talking of medical debt in particular, that's a little bit different than some other kinds of debt. There have been multiple surveys on this. The numbers differ from study to study, but general findings are that people will delay medical care or skip it altogether because they can't afford it, which is really the last thing you should do. If we're talking about, personal debt, sure, I'm not going to buy this thing that I want, but medical care is something that's not something you opt out of, right? In your view, what is the first step to overcoming this fear of spending money on something that you need, like medical care, and asking for help to pay for it?
Medical expenses are an investment in yourself. They are an investment in your future well-being. If you put off care, and could be even just a dental checkup, it could be something small like that, versus something big where you're not feeling well and you're not seeking care because you don't really even want to know, if there's a bad outcome there, a bad answer. The problem is health issues compound, right? They can get really bad really quickly. So that means you may be looking at a much higher medical care and medical cost down the road if you are delaying that maintenance of your own body. That care can really compound. Kind of think about it like delayed maintenance on a home. If you don't fix the roof and it continues leaking, that roof repair is going to be a whole lot more expensive next year than it would be today. So putting it off and kind of delaying the inevitable is not wise from a health perspective or a financial perspective. So it can seem scary, and I do think that the medical world is particularly challenging because we go to the doctor having no idea, what the bill is going to cost in many cases. We simply don't have a whole lot of transparency there. So you can certainly have conversations with your doctor once you are there, letting them know, hey, I don't have great health coverage, or maybe in some cases, maybe people don't have coverage at all. And that's a whole other conversation to have. But if you are worried about the bill, let your physician, let your doctors know. They probably have a lot more help that they can give you than you might think. Everything from giving you free samples of medication to kind of pointing you in the right direction in terms of making sure something is going to be covered by a health policy, if there's a gray area there. I mean, there could be a lot of ways where they can help you and point you in the right direction. Also, I always tell people, if you've got medical bills, don't pay for them with a credit card. If you cannot afford those bills, putting them on a credit card is not going to help you. Medical debt has some favorable treatment in terms of how it's reported on your credit report, for instance. It also gives you some options when it comes to negotiating with medical service providers. You have a lot more leeway if you have not put debt on a credit card, because a credit card issuer really doesn't care what the charge is. They don't care that it's a medical bill versus buying shoes. To them, it's just a bill that you have to pay, and they're going to make sure that they collect on that. A medical provider, on the other hand, if you have an outstanding balance with them, they're very sympathetic to working out a payment plan, maybe even giving you a deferment on payment over a period. Maybe even reducing your bill if you are able to negotiate with them. So you have a lot more options there versus just paying for something on a credit card. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, or it's a little counterintuitive. They think, oh my gosh, I just need to pay this bill. Let's just put it on a credit card and then I'll worry about the credit card later. That's really the worst thing you can do.
Do you think that people have a hard time asking about options, even when they're available, just sitting in front of somebody and saying, I can't afford this. What are my options? Where does that embarrassment come from? Where does that shame come from?
Yeah.
Why are we so afraid to ask for help?
Absolutely. And I do think there's an assumption that, oh, well, you got this care, you can afford it, or you should be able to afford it. When in reality, our medical care is very expensive. We know that those medical costs have been inflated well above the rate of inflation in our economy for many years. So it's something that until you're involved in it, until you've got a medical bill kind of sitting on your computer or on your desk, you may not think about it. But once you have that situation where you were either forced to get a very expensive care, or you chose to get very expensive care, it's kind of like this whole world opens up to you. And before you experience a medical bill, there's really no reason why you would understand the intricacies of that and what's going on with health insurance. So I do think a lot of people just don't have experience with it. They haven't, thank goodness, haven't had to go through the process of getting care and dealing with health insurance. But once you have, and once you're kind of indoctrinated into that world, I hope it will embolden people a bit to kind of stand up for their rights and feel empowered to ask for more and ask for what they can get, just simply as somebody who is in a situation perhaps that they didn't want to be in the first place.
Medical debt does not exist in a vacuum. Most people who have medical debt are not debt-free people who then find themselves, needing some kind of health care and all of a sudden they find themselves in a sea of debt. What is your advice for getting your arms around your debt as a whole? Because as we talked about, medical debt works a little differently than something like credit card debt, or paying your mortgage, or all of those other things that you might have debt for. So all debt's not created equal. How do you figure out how to tackle it strategically?
Yeah, Erica, this is a great question. And it's probably one of the most common questions that I hear from Money Girl podcast listeners is, how do I prioritize this debt? How do I think about this holistically? What should I tackle? All of it or just, one small piece of it? How do I kind of think about doing it in a smart way? And I do recommend listing out all of your debt, like literally listing it in a spreadsheet, line by line.
I can hear listeners' heads exploding when you say that, because that sounds very, very scary.
And it is. It is a real reality check. And I want people not only to list their debts, but also list their assets. List your assets first. List those at the top. And so you can see, these are all the wonderful things I have. If you've got some savings, you've got some retirement accounts, maybe you've got, equity in a home or, a nice value on your home. List those out, then list out the debts underneath and rank those debts in order. And in most cases, listing debts from the highest to the lowest interest rate is a really good place to start. And what you find is at the bottom of that list are going to be the things like the mortgage, the things, maybe a student loan debt, things that are typically going to be, maybe if you're really lucky and you got a mortgage a few years ago, the 2%, 3%, now that's going to be more like 6%. But those are your bottom of the barrel worries. The top priorities are going to be the high rate, the double digit credit card bills. Maybe you took out a personal loan when your credit wasn't so great and you got a high double digit personal loan or even a payday loan, something very, very high rate. That's really where we need to start. And why do we start there? Well, it's because the opportunity cost of that money is best spent paying down that debt. If you could use your extra money to invest for a higher return, that's what I would recommend. But you're not going to get a higher return than a 22 or 26 or 28% credit card debt. Paying off that debt gives you an immediate after-tax return. So if you're paying 28% on the credit card, all of a sudden when that debt is paid, you're now in a situation where you've saved yourself that 28%. You can kind of think of it as an after-tax return. That's a pretty nice return. You're not going to find that kind of return anywhere. But when we talk about lower rate debts like the mortgage or maybe the 5 or 6% student loan, you can likely earn the same or more by investing. So we want to save those debts for last. They also come with some tax benefits if you're able to claim them on your tax return, making them cost even less on an after-tax basis. So I would start with the highest rate first. And a lot of people say, well, Laura, I have a really small little student loan that's at 5%. I'd really just like to wipe that out. And I say, go for it. If you are losing sleep and it's really irritating you that you still have this small balance on a student loan, and even if it is a low rate, pay it off. This is why we call it personal finance. It is personal. And I would never say just go with the math. A lot of it really has to do with how you feel about the debt. So we have to take that into account as well. But if we're talking about a lot of debt, ranking them in order of highest to lowest is where I'm going to recommend you start.
Cool then, Laura. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.